Hi, my name is Steve Murphy, and this is the Law Business Insider. Each and every week, we bring you important issues and the people behind them. And today, we have a very interesting show with a former prosecutor by the name of Tim Burke, who has written a book called The Paradiso Files, Boston's Unknown Serial Killer. He's now in private practice representing a lot of law enforcement. Joining us after his interview will be a woman by the name of Eve Carson, who is the sister-in-law of a woman that was maybe killed by this Leonard Paradiso, the Boston's unknown serial killer. And we're going to be talking with her about this case, too. But first, I want to introduce my good friend and my co-host, Roger Clark, of the law firm of Clark, Goldberg, and Madruga. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Steve, it's good to see you.
Tim Burke, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Roger, how are you both doing tonight?
Great.
Excellent. You know, Tim is not only a former prosecutor, he's in private practice right now, and you have a criminal defense practice, I would imagine?
I do. Actually, I represent a lot of police departments, too, and a lot of labor relations type of cases, too.
Okay. And but you have written a book that has become a bestseller, and the name of the book is The Paradiso Files. Tell us about Mr. Paradiso.
Well, Paradiso was Leonard Paradiso. Lenny the Quahog was his nickname.
What is that quahog? What does that mean?
Well, you're obviously from the West Coast, because the quahog is akin to a clam. It's a much larger version, and I think I described it as what a piece of Goodyear tire tastes like on a hot summer day. It's not. It's found in the Atlantic, and it's used to make certain clam dishes as a substitute. But he was a fish peddler in the Boston area, in Boston, in the surrounding areas, and he operated relatively undetected for about 15 years. And during this time period, I've linked him to at least 7 murders and 7 or 8 other rapes, most of which he escaped any penalty for. At the time I was doing the investigation into his case, there was a young woman who had disappeared from Logan Airport. She was a Harvard graduate student. Her name was Joan Webster, and she landed at Logan Airport on November 28, 1981, at about 10:30 in the evening. And this is Thanksgiving weekend, 1981. She had just been at home in New Jersey with her parents, coming back to Harvard for her graduate studies. She landed at the airport, went to the terminal, got her baggage, walked out of the airport, and disappeared. And she was never seen again for the next 9 years. And the book traces Paradiso's activities leading up to and including another murder case of a young woman by the name of Maria Iannuzzi, who was strangled 2 years before Joan Webster disappeared. Maria Iannuzzi's body was found behind a lobster pound in outside of Boston, what they call the Lynn Marsh Road. And this young woman, Maria Iannuzzi, her murder was unsolved for like 2.5 years. And shortly after Joan Webster's disappearance, her handbag was found across the road from where this other young woman, Maria Iannuzzi, was murdered. So it's the investigation of Paradiso, and it's like a 3-act storyline where his previous activities, the investigation of him, and then the trial that takes place with the murder of Maria Iannuzzi.
And let me ask you this question: you mentioned Joan Webster, correct?
Right.
A lot of people, you've tied all these people together with Paradiso. But there's some people that doubt he was this serial killer.
Well, I think that's true in any situation when you have, a case like this. There's always speculation. There's speculation that Joan Webster was killed by Whitey Bulger,
right?
Who was a prominent.
Yeah, but why would he kill her? What'd she have to do with him?
Well, he wouldn't. I mean, that's just some of the speculation. And the Zodiac killer was also thrown in the mix too. That she, from the West Coast, that he was also a possible suspect in the minds of some of the critics of this book. But there's no doubt in my mind, certainly, and I'm very intimately familiar with all the in-depth prosecution that went on and the investigation that went on in this case, that Paradiso is responsible for her disappearance and murder.
Yeah, a lot of people claimed, I think his brother, his sister, well, they're related, right? And even he died, didn't he?
He died just about 10 days after the book was first published.
Right. He never admitted to killing any other person other than the one that he was convicted for, and he didn't even admit that, did he?
No, actually, he denied everything all along. He was, before my first connection with him was as a part of a grand jury investigation. And 6 years earlier, he had been prosecuted for another rape, attempted murder of a hitchhiker near the Science Museum in Boston. He picked her up, the hitchhiker brought her up to Andover, which is about 25 miles north of Boston, brought her down a dirt road, was literally on top of her strangling her when, coincidentally, the Andover police came down a dirt road, caught him in the act of strangling her. And, of course, he said he found her that way at the point in time that they actually apprehended him. So, I mean, it's not unusual that he, of course, denied, attempting to rape and murder this young girl that he was convicted for by a jury. So that's not unusual that someone like this is going to deny his complicity in a crime like rape or murder.
Well, Tim, his victims were people that did not know him, I take it.
Correct. There's a number of women who disappeared shortly after, while Paradiso was awaiting trial for this attempted rape and murder of a girl, the young woman I just talked about, in Andover. He was out on bail, $100 bail.
$100 bail?
Right, for the attempted rape and murder of this girl. And literally, he's on top of her, strangling her, and the police catch him, and he's placed out on bail for $100. And during that 10-month time period that he is out on bail, he's free to go anywhere in Massachusetts. And during this time period, there are 3 young women from what they call the combat zone of Boston who all disappear in like a 6 or 7 month time period.
And for our audience, the combat zone was an area where they had a lot of bars and various other nefarious activities, right? Right, Steve.
It was a prostitution area. Yeah. And he preyed on young women in that general vicinity. And so those murders were never solved. And all 3 of them were all brought up the same route that he had taken when he abducted this hitchhiker that he was out on bail for. He had taken up the same route, Route 93, and they are subsequently raped, murdered, and dumped alongside of the road within 4 miles of the same location where this young woman, who he was waiting trial for, had been attempted to rape and murder. So those murders were never solved. He went to jail for about 3 years for the attempted rape that I mentioned of the girl in Andover. He was released on numerous furloughs during this time period while he was in custody, almost every weekend. And then after he was paroled, released from prison, he was placed on parole. And a year after that is when this young woman from East Boston, Marie Inuzzi, she was murdered. And he had been at a wedding with her, with his girlfriend. He picked her up in a bar after the wedding and then drove her up to this lobster pound I described before, brought her behind the lobster pound. It's a very secluded area, strangled her, left her body there. And unbeknownst to the investigators at the time, before I got into the case, no one realized that he had actually worked at this lobster pound. So there are a lot of circumstantial facts linking him, in addition to the witnesses who were inmates with him, who eventually testified against him at the trial of